In a world that is evidently becoming less natty by the minute, it has come to my attention that people are constantly looking for new shortcuts for gains, and SARMs are starting to be the next big thing. In fact, word on the street is that SARMs are safe, have virtually no side effects, and most importantly, they'll get you those gains. Well guys, just like most things, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So let's take an in-depth, unbiased look at SARMs, discuss their benefits and risks, and be sure to stay tuned until the very end because I will be sharing my own opinion on whether or not I think that they're worth the risk. So first things first, what exactly are SARMs? Well, for those of you who don't know, SARMs are a group of compounds called selective androgen receptor modulators, and they're essentially drugs that are structurally very similar to anabolic steroids, which should tell you something, but like I said, I will remain unbiased for now. Now, as of today, there are quite a few types of SARMs on the market, and unlike pro-hormones, they're currently legal for over-the-counter purchase. As for research on SARMs, well, it has been very limited so far, but it definitely looks promising. They appear to help build muscle and strength, accelerate fat loss, and increase overall sports performance to a level comparable to steroids, but without as many side effects. Now, although the majority of studies have been performed on rodents, SARMs are still an interesting subject that merits discussion. But how exactly do SARMs work and how do they compare to steroids? Well, to understand how SARMs work, we first have to briefly look at how hormones function in the human body. Imagine, if you will, hormones are chemical messengers. They help carry messages from cell to cell, successfully establishing communication among them. These messages are usually vital instructions and commands, and as they reach their targeted cell, the instructions are carried out. Simple, right? Now, androgens are hormones that are associated with masculinity. They regulate the development and maintenance of male characteristics by binding to androgen receptors in the body, and perhaps the most commonly known androgen is testosterone. Now, when you introduce anabolic steroids like testosterone to your body, with testosterone being a hormone, all of the following three things are going to happen to a different extent. Number one, the testosterone will bind to your cell's androgen receptors. Number two, it will be converted to DHT, or dihydrotestosterone, which also binds to androgen receptors. And number three, and some of it will be converted to the female hormone estradiol, which is essentially estrogen and binds to your cell's estrogen receptors. And here's the English translation to all of that. Introducing steroid-like hormones like testosterone to your system will bring about anabolic, androgenic, and some estrogenic effects. But what you do want exclusively the most is the anabolic effects. Those lead to increased muscle protein synthesis, which results in more muscle growth and accelerated fat loss. What we don't want are their androgenic and estrogenic effects. This is because the androgenic part of steroids is responsible for accelerated hair growth, man boobs, acne, and other side effects you probably don't want. The other serious concern with steroids is the strong possibility of side effects even in low and controlled dosages. This is why I get so mad when people say, if you do steroids right, they're safe. Well, guys, the truth is that any side effects can happen at any level of usage, and these side effects may include high blood pressure, progression of heart disease, increased LDL cholesterol, mood swings, hair loss, sexual dysfunction, and liver cirrhosis, just to name a few. And that's usually why people ultimately decide steroids are not worth the risk. They simply don't want to risk everything just to get some gains that are not even permanent, because you will lose most of your gains when you stop injecting. And while some of these side effects are reversible, some of them are not, and you can easily end up dead or needing testosterone replacement therapy for the rest of your life. But the main reason why steroids are usually deemed unfit for our health is their dangerous byproducts, namely the DHT and estrogen-like compounds, and that's where SARMs comes in. The issue with steroids is that they have an anabolic to androgenic ratio of 1:1. SARMs, on the other hand, promise the same anabolic results that steroids bring to the table without the androgenic adverse effects. This is because they selectively bind only to muscle and bone cell receptors, and they're not easily converted to DHT or estrogen, which are the main drivers of many unwanted effects of steroid use. Sounds amazing, right? Well, let's keep digging. Alright guys, so let's talk about some of the most popular SARMs currently on the market, as there are quite a few, with some of them being more powerful, meaning there's a higher risk of encountering unwanted side effects with them, while some are much weaker. The most popular SARMs right now are ostarine, cardarine, andarine, ligandrol, or also called anabolicum. Now, why the strange alphanumeric names, you might ask? Well, SARMs haven't been approved for medical use, so pharmaceutical marketers haven't bothered naming them yet. And with that being said, let's take a quick look at each of them. First up is ostarine, and ostarine is by far the most studied SARM, and studies actually found some powerful results. Not only did it help people gain muscle and lose fat without exercising, but the side effects were pretty much non-existent. There was some testosterone suppression reported, but not to a meaningful degree. Some studies also found a link between ostarine and treating cancer patients, but the results are still pretty much premature. Next up is cardarine, and all of the studies regarding cardarine are performed on rodents, so no human trials currently exist. And with that being said, researchers found cardarine to be excellent at burning fat while preserving muscle in rats. The side effects were again insignificant. Next up, we have andarine, and andarine, or S4, is one of the first, if not the first SARM on the market, and it's usually stacked with other SARMs. Its biggest side effect is visual abnormality, and that's because it actually binds to certain receptors in your eye cells, which can cause altered color perception and nighttime blindness, which sounds pretty hardcore. That's why arginine is usually not the first choice for people looking to gain some muscle. And lastly, we have ligandrol. Now, ligandrol is one of the better studied SARMs, and exactly like ostarine, it shows promising results judging from human trials. It has been shown to increase muscle and bone mass as well as sex drive without damaging the liver or the prostate. It doesn't seem to offer any fat loss benefits on its own, and that's why most people stack it with ostarine. High dosages of ligandrol have been shown to suppress natural hormone production, hence people with low testosterone levels tend to skip this one altogether, so you gotta be careful with that. But now, after hearing all of this, are you ready to buy your first bottle of SARMs? This is probably the question you guys are asking. Well, don't be hasty, because it's time to talk about the problem with SARMs. So guys, the main problem with SARMs is, quite frankly, there's really no sufficient research. The studies do indeed offer some promising results, but there are no long-term human studies. Unfortunately, we just don't know enough about how they work and their potential long-term side effects, which is a very legitimate cause for concern. SARMs were not even initially intended for human use, and most people willing to try them actually have to purchase them for experimental research only, as, once again, they are not meant for human consumption. Having said that, they might be legal, but they are certainly not allowed in most competitive sports, and they can actually get you banned if you're tested positive for them. Furthermore, like steroids, the more SARMs you use, the more side effects you are bound to experience. Acne, hair loss, testosterone suppression, and other side effects associated with steroid use are still very possible with SARMs, especially if you're not using small dosages. Also, the issue with steroids and steroid-like drugs is that they are addictive. It's very difficult to stick to a small dosage when you start experiencing their anabolic benefits. You're going to start seeing yourself in the mirror looking bigger, looking more ripped, and you're going to want to take more. Another concern that I have with SARMs is the substantial cancer growth that rodents experience in several of the studies. Of course, guys, humans are not rodents, but as long as there are no long-term studies on SARMs and cancer, I think it would be ill-advised to use them as bodybuilding supplements. Guys, remember, cancer is a mutation of your cells, and whenever you take a drug that's going to enhance your cells, you're also enhancing these types of mutations. And finally, since you can get SARMs everywhere now, I would address this as well. A lot of supplement companies have started selling SARMs, and the main issue is that SARMs are not qualified or quantified substances, meaning you don't really know what's in the bottle you purchased or which China lab it came from. And with unregulated substances like SARMs, there's always the possibility that you're buying a powder or a pill that looks like ostarine, but it is in fact clenbuterol or trenbolone, which is pretty frightening. You don't know what you're putting in your body. So it's really up to you if you decide that it's worth the risk. So let's summarize. SARMs are steroid-like compounds that are not as effective as steroids, but certainly far more potent than common supplements like creatine or beta-alanine, right? They also seem to have minimal side effects, but the actual research is far from indicative or remotely final. So let's look at the pros and the cons. The pros: steroid-like anabolic results, minimal short-term side effects, easy to recover from, minimal conversion to DHT and estrogen. And now the cons: they're not as potent as steroids, there's unknown long-term side effects, there's a potential cause for cancer, and you will lose your gains as soon as you stop taking them. And also, guys, keep in mind, the extent of the potential side effects and benefits actually depends on dosage, type of SARM you're using, your genetic factors, overall nutrition, age, sex, etc. So now that you're armed with this information, as always, the choice is yours. But remember, anytime you attempt biohacking, there always carries a risk with it, especially if you're trying cutting-edge drugs like SARMs. And even if the gains are great, they're still temporary and will go away when you stop taking them. That's how the human body works, guys. It retains the muscle mass it needs, and when you stop taking chemicals and hormones that trick your body into building muscle, it simply doesn't have a need for all that muscle mass anymore. And when you stay natural, you keep your gains forever. So unless you plan on taking SARMs the rest of your life, I'd stick with being natty for life. And that's where the meaningful gains are, guys. And more importantly, that's where the core values of health and fitness are. In my opinion, the risk of using SARMs far outweigh the benefits, and they're just not necessary to build a muscular, strong, and lean body that you can be proud of. Be sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed the video and got some great information out of it. And guys, if you would like more in-depth videos on the individual SARMs with links to proper studies and all of that, leave a like and comment below and we can get that done too in future videos. And as always, more good stuff coming soon. See you guys.